the Philippine Space Agency, to our esteemed guests in the room, our live stream viewers, and our dedicated PhilSA crewmates, thank you for joining us today. We are honored to have you here for what promises to be an insightful and inspiring discussion. I am Neil from Space Education and Scholarships Division, and I will be your host for today. Once again, welcome to the lecture on innovations in aerospace and satellite technology entitled Commercial Spaceflight and Science Opportunities for Emerging Space Nation. We are very excited for today's special lecture. So without further ado, we would like to invite Dr. Mark Cesar Artelampas, our Director for of the Space Science or Space Technology and Mission Systems Bureau, to give us the opening remarks.
Again, good morning, everyone here, and to our viewers who are streaming via our official Facebook page. On behalf of the Philippine Space Agency, or PhilSA, I'm pleased to welcome you this special lecture on innovations in aerospace and satellite technology. So we thank the U.S. Embassy and the Philippine American Educational Foundation, or also known as the Fulbright Commission to Philippines, for partnering with us in making this event possible. We're honored to host today's speaker, an accomplished aerospace engineer and entrepreneur whose work has significantly contributed to the field of space technology and STEM education. And I'm sure she'll tell you more about it later. This lecture is particularly relevant and timely to PhilSA's ongoing work, especially our work on the key development areas of space research and development, as well as space industry and capacity building. So these focus areas drive our efforts to design, develop, and deploy spaceborne platforms and mission systems, and pursue innovations that will deliver broad and lasting benefits in the years to come. So the insights we gain today on satellite missions, systems engineering, aerospace innovation, all of these can inform how we build and scale our own capabilities in satellite systems integration, mission planning, and operations, and ground-based support infrastructure. So, as we aspire and move toward more advanced space missions, learning from global experts brings us new perspectives which may refine our strategies and bring in innovative and efficient approaches to systems development. Today's lecture also contributes to our larger goal of enhancing national space technology capacity, a goal we share here with the scientific community, our government partners, and academic institutions represented here today in person and online. So you'll notice we have some student interns, and most of the staff in PhilSA are very young. Some are fresh graduates. I think the median age is still 28. The ones who are laughing are above that median age. Yeah. So beyond technology, this session reinforces our commitment to knowledge exchange and international collaboration, which are essential to accelerating our progress and ensuring inclusive growth in the space sector. And we hope this lecture will not only provide technical insights, but also inspire new questions, ideas, and partnerships that support our collective mission. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to a meaningful and enriching discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Doc Mark. The subject of commercial space flight is more relevant than ever. And we are privileged to have a true pioneer with us today. To introduce our distinguished speaker, we welcome Mr. Chad Kinnear, Deputy Director of the Public Engagement at the U.S. Embassy in Manila. A round of applause, please.
Sa inyong lahat. Good morning. Happy Philippine Space Week. We're so happy to have Aisha coming during this week. It was wonderful for us, and of course, you're the first her first engagement here is with PhilSA, and we feel really good about that because as the United States, we want to be the partners on space exploration with the Philippines, and so that was that was great. I just want to start by thanking Dr. Talampas and everyone at the Philippine Space Agency for the warm welcome. It's my privilege to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Aisha Bowe, a former NASA rocket scientist, award-winning award-winning founder and citizen astronaut who is redefining what it means to lead in science, education, and innovation. Earlier this year, Aisha flew aboard the Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket as part of a historic all-female crew, conducting NASA-backed research and flight qualified experiments in microgravity. She is the founder of STEMboard, a technology company, and the creator of Lingo, an ed tech startup bringing hands-on STEM education to students around the world. Her remarkable journey from community college to the frontiers of space has inspired audiences across the globe, reminding us that the word impossible is only a suggestion. Aisha's visit is part of the U.S. Speaker Program, which connects American experts with global audiences to exchange ideas and explore solutions to shared challenges. It also builds on the legacy of Fulbright Philippines, which for decades has strengthened the ties between the United States and the Philippines through educational exchanges. Sorry, through educational exchanges. This year, Fulbright Philippines and PhilSA successfully did a send-off for the inaugural cohort of the Fulbright PhilSA Scholarship Program, sending scholars to the United States for advanced studies in space and technology. Aisha's presence today reflects the deepening U.S.-Philippine space partnership, advancing innovation, capacity building, and joint exploration in space science and technology. The U.S. Embassy looks forward to continuing our support for Fulbright and PhilSA by bringing leading American experts to the Philippines to share knowledge, foster collaboration, and inspire innovation. As partners in prosperity, I hope her talk and the discussions that will follow, and I hope you have a bunch of questions to ask her, will add to the value and the efforts of PhilSA. Please join me in welcoming Aisha Bowe.
Kumusta, PhilSA? It's an absolute honor to be here with you today. I am incredibly grateful to Dr. Mark. Thank you so much to the U.S. Embassy here, and to all of those who are watching wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in to what I believe will be a really exciting and engaging conversation. I was passionate about talking about this topic today because of where I started. And while I absolutely love this baseball card from the NS-31 mission, I want to take you guys behind this. I think a lot of people probably saw this, right? Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I started my academic career as someone who was not interested in space and science, as someone who did not see themselves in STEM. And so we went around the room today and we talked about the people who are in space and science education. There's a part of this talk today that's for you and how you can engage the next generation of people who are like me. I didn't even apply to college initially. I went to community college, and it was there that I found my passion for not only math, but space and science. And that took me into 2 degrees from the University of Michigan. My undergrad is in aerospace engineering. My master's degree is in space systems engineering with a concentration on nanosatellites. Hey, CubeSat guy. We said CubeSats. I was like, yes. And I started my career at NASA Ames, which is in Silicon Valley, California, working on 3U CubeSats. And specifically, we were looking at multiple payload deployment for new rockets for a very small company at the time called SpaceX, who was launching out of Kwajalein. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a little bit bigger now. Just a little bit, just a little bit. Those early days for me were really, really exciting. And at that time, it was fairly uncommon to be a rookie engineer and actually have the opportunity to take space hardware, integrate it, and actually fly it. And I had that chance because in the small spacecraft division, we were launching out of Minotaur 4 Pluses in Kodiak. And we had other partnerships with the certain small company that I mentioned before, where they were launching as well. And we had an opportunity to see our research fly. And there was nothing more rewarding for me early in my career than to see that I was able to go from a project that went from concept to execution in about 3 years. Mind you, when I talked to other people, they didn't have that experience. In fact, some would work on programs or projects for 20 years and not have the opportunity to see those projects ever take flight. And that doesn't mean that those projects weren't. They were incredibly significant and some of the largest, most ambitious programs that humanity has embarked on. But the timeline for them was much longer. And thus some of the younger folks like me may have gotten discouraged and gone into other areas with other companies or other organizations that were not in space. And that's how I ended up transitioning out of NASA. I spent 6 years there and I loved every piece of it. I love being able to go into the community and educate. I love taking my astronaut ice cream and my little one-use satellite and talking about what we were doing. But for a lot of the students, 6 years, 10 years, 12 years was too long to see a dream fly. And so I started saying to myself, how can I take my expertise as a NASA engineer, which once I transitioned out of small spacecraft division, I worked on flight trajectory optimization, which doesn't really come up very often. And flight trajectory optimization can be distilled into the paths that commercial aircraft take when they're navigating the aerospace system in the United States and around the world. And in that division, I was publishing at least once a year, and I was learning about the intellectual rigor and gained the skill set to contribute to the knowledge base, which I truly believe in research and publication. But I didn't see that as well in small spacecraft. And I started to say to myself, okay, how do I, as a rookie engineer, being early in my career, take some of these things that I really loved about working at NASA, the rigor, the excitement, the mission, and turn that into something that could become infectious for other people. And so 12 years ago, I started my first company. It's called STEMboard, and STEMboard is really an engineering firm. At the time, I couldn't talk too much about what we did, and so I leaned into a lot of the work that we did in the community with STEM engagement. And I focused on how to educate and inspire the next generation to pursue aerospace fields. And a funny thing happened. People who I was mentoring actually became aerospace engineers. They actually started building companies and they actually started challenging the norm. And so as I talk to you today, I'm coming from a wealth of experience both building STEM talent pipelines, working on world-class research, and having had the opportunity to be recognized for the work that I've done both by NASA and other organizations around the world through global STEM advocacy and science, and specifically science in the commercial domain. As many of you know, we're in the middle of a really amazing and exciting time. So if you look from left to right, this is how things used to be done. NASA had its own vehicle, and there was a wealth of partnerships here. And there still are, especially when we talk about the International Space Station, where they're doing a lot of meaningful research. But there was more of an appetite for this research than there was capacity for it. And what ended up happening was a lot of things that were great and that had excellent PIs and were well funded may not have actually made it into the payload. Not because they weren't good ideas, but because there was a lot of competition. Enter into the modern age, where when I started, none of these companies had a human rated flight capability. Now they're launching more than some of the old companies, shall we say. Let's not say old. Legacy companies. Let's say legacy, well seasoned. Let's go well seasoned, right? Some of the companies that have been around for quite some time, and they're launching at a really impressive pace, at a high level of safety. And with this comes a phenomenal opportunity to revisit who gets access to space, how they get access to space, and what is done. And that's why I'm downright thrilled to be talking to you. I'm trying not to wiggle too much, right? It's like I want to jump up and down, but this is a really important time in the evolution of space history because commercial providers now have the capability to engage commercial astronauts to do independent space. And there's a lot of individuals who are going to fly, who are looking for payloads, who are dealing with tight timelines, and they may not have the background that I have. And that is where you come in. I want to take you back to 2022. That's when I signed my contract to fly with Blue Origin. And I see some of your faces. You're like, that is several years ago. Yes, it was not an overnight thing. I did not just wake up and end up on TMZ and was like, we're going to fly. No, I signed in 2022. And when I signed, I was focused on putting aerospace on the same level with arts and sports and culture because it's very difficult to be what you cannot see. And everywhere in the world, space is competing with airtime next to Beyonce and Taylor Swift and everything else. And so, after all of these years of being out in the community, I said, how can I not only elevate our profession and what we do, but potentially put forward a model for US space and defense and the world? Because if we don't make ourselves sexy, if we don't make ourselves exciting, if we don't make ourselves interesting, we are going to lose out on the ability to connect to the next generation and inspire them to do what we are passionate about. There was just one catch. I was able to raise the money. I was able to be assigned a seat. But where I struggled and where I do think there is a need that you can help fill was how was I, without the backing of a large agency and without a PI and without abundance of resources, going to execute world-class science on my mission? Now, I will tell you, for the majority of my life, I have not been a patient person, kind of impatient. I like things to go fast and I want to push. But I got lucky here because at the time, there was a delay between when the vehicle would be ready to fly and when I signed. And it gave me time to really reflect on the state of independent space research, or at least that's what I'm going to call it for this presentation. And when I looked around, I looked at the private space flight companies. I looked at SpaceX, I looked at Blue Origin, I looked at Virgin. And what I noticed was while there was science being conducted, a majority of that science was still done by large institutional partners. A lot of that science, if you were not in the field, was relatively inaccessible. And I started to kind of think through how could I contribute to lowering some of these barriers? How can I put together a mission that would in some way move this needle? And when I spoke to Blue Origin, and they were incredibly receptive to my proposition, I said, if I fly, I'm flying with science. And I'm going to fly with as much science as we can fit into the time that we have in microgravity. Because as you know, in microgravity, changes on the cellular level happen within seconds. And if I could work with them to integrate a payload, like I did when I was at NASA, to identify an institution that had the capability and the capacity to do world-class research and lay out a plan, I might actually have a solid chance at not only conducting a successful experiment, but publishing from it. When I looked at the topics that I wanted to study, there were a few. And the first was I was really interested in agriculture and food security, something I hear the Philippines cares about. So I hope you like my example. I was also really interested in gathering biometric data ethically. And so you'll see the furthest photo is me wearing a bio button where I captured my biometric data, which I contributed to NASA-backed research repositories that are going to aggregate the data and study how we, women and people of color, are impacted when it comes to long duration spaceflight. This I thought was also particularly interesting because as a commercial person, I also had not thought about being able to contribute back to the very organization that raised me, so to speak. And so when I talk about this research, the research could not have been made possible without a new space company. And no, I'm not talking about Blue Origin. I'm actually talking about this. This device is very similar to a Kennedy fixation tube, which is very similar to what is like a syringe. And you see this a lot on shuttle. But I could not get this hardware. This hardware was restricted to the work that was being done with NASA and certain PIs. And so this here was the first roadblock that I encountered, which was how was I actually going to procure a device to do the science in? And so I stepped back and I said, okay, if I can build this roadmap, if I can find a way to find a private company that will allow me to flight qualify their hardware, and then if I can find a research institution that has focus in agriculture and food security that corroborates previous NASA data, then I think we have a win. I think that's a solid hypothesis. And so I embarked upon this journey where I thought about how was it that commercial space can benefit the future. And now you guys come from all different areas, but every single one of you probably has an experiment, a sensor, something that could fly or that should fly. And what I want to present to you is a way of thinking about how to get there through strategic partnerships with commercial astronauts who own their seats and who may be looking for science that is turnkey and that is ready to go. Because the likelihood of it is that you have already been working on these ideas. Your ideas will nicely fit into an abstract. They probably come with experts that can help integrate a payload or talk to a payload person on Blue Origin side or on Virgin side or whoever the launch provider is. But what you may not be aware of is that there is a healthy appetite in the commercial space arena, especially when you talk about private individuals who are manifested to fly to conduct the science. And that is where you can fill a gap. For me, I wanted to address these things because I think there's some of the challenges that are facing this world. They certainly concern me. And in order to do that, we genetically sequenced crop plants in space on my mission. Now, I don't think that made CBS, but the way that we were able to do that was by building in not only trial after trial after trial when I was preparing to fly, but we also had the exact time that I was supposed to actuate the FPAs built into the calls when we were in microgravity. So we had a timestamp within which to correlate the research and the results. This is up close. So here you have 3 vials that are the control, and then 3 that would eventually become the experiment. And for me, this was really exciting because now that this has been qualified, anybody can use it. It's not exclusive to this vehicle, but it also provides a gateway for anybody who's looking to fly on New Shepard, who may or may want to do agricultural research with PhilSA, to do the same thing in the future, because there are no shortages of people who want to go to space. Well, this 5 minutes, which, okay, let's see. Videos are always a challenging part. Let's see if we can get them to play. Double tap. Ooh. Oh, man. Can we get it? This actually moves. And it's some really beautiful Earth footage. It like rotates. Oh, man. Videos are always the challenge whenever you're giving a live presentation. But let me just walk you through this. Okay. So what happens is that the Earth looks beautiful, moves rhythmically in the background. And I'm floating, I'm, enjoying the scenery. I'm reflecting on all the amazing things that got me here, some of which I thought went wrong, but ultimately went right. And at the end of this, there is a call in the cabin, and that call is for me to conduct my experiment. And there's video, and there'll be more coming out here in the future months. But you can firmly see me, and I say firmly because that's what it took. It took a really firm grasp. If you guys are ever going to go to space, let me give you a pro tip: work on your grip strength. Okay, if you ever have to plunge one of these things, you might realize that you're under leveraged because you're in microgravity, and you're going to need all of the strength in your hand to get the thing to work out. But there is amazing footage, which we'll have to share with you guys for the recap, where you actually watch me and I'm able to successfully conduct the experiment, secure it into its pouch, which is located underneath the armrest. And I take a gentle but noticeable deep breath when I realize that we were actually able to execute our science objectives on the flight. Now, that relief only lasted for about 5 minutes because any of us who have done an experiment, you're looking for what? The results, right? You want to make sure that once you've conducted the experiment, it actually went well. And so I was riddled with a little bit of anxiety when we landed. We hit the ground, not too hard, but enough to know that we were there. And I was laying in the seat and I was saying to myself, okay, Aisha, I really hope that this worked out. Well, you know what? Not only did it work out, but this is actually the cover sheet of the paper that we're publishing in Sydney next month. This will be published at ICAS. And you may note that there's a number of agencies on here that you may not traditionally think of when you think about space or commercial space. Namely, working with the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation. We have a number of Brazilian professors. We have a collaboration with Winston-Salem State, which was the HBCU. And all of this came together to not only flight qualify the hardware, but to produce world-class research that is peer-reviewed and that further corroborates NASA results on the same crop plants. And all of this came out of the desire for me as a commercial person to find a way to contribute to science. And I could not have done that without going to the institutions and being able to say, look, I have a seat. I really want to fly science. How can we work together in order to make that happen? Now, this is an area that I really look forward to discussing because I find that this could be game-changing for the Philippines. There was more than one science experiment on that crew, and PhilSA contributed to that. You're building off of your previous success. And that's why I wanted this to be the topic of the discussion today, because I wanted to know, have you thought about expanding that model? Have you thought about becoming a turnkey solution for people around the world who need the brilliance and the ideas that you have and want to execute them on orbit? Because there's a lot of room here. I mean, in 2023, we still saw that the majority of suborbital research payloads came from US space institutions. I think we could share. We also saw that with the recent Blue Origin flight, we had 2 individuals flying that conducted scientific research. There's more of this. I see the individuals reaching out to me who are asking, how did you do it? How can I do it too? But they don't necessarily have aerospace backgrounds. They may not have worked for NASA. They may not understand what it takes to publish or even how to conduct good research. And this is where I think you can take the skills you have here and apply them to a problem with short-term outcome. Because the other thing that's really cool about this is a lot of the individuals who are in the commercial space, they may have already either fully funded or partially funded their seat, which represents a lower cost of entry and an opportunity to get involved in a lot of different missions over time. I actually have had the fortune here of getting an opportunity to interact with Christine. I have not yet met Chino, but I'm sure that in the not too distant future. But learning about them really inspired me because there are a lot of people here who I know who are either engaged in the analog community or who are now actively vying for commercial space opportunities, which provides a nice foundation to begin to test out some of the engineering prototypes before you bring them on orbit. Flying my experiment, it was not the first time, right? We had many meetings about how we were going to do it and some dry runs. And even once we were there integrating the payload, there was a lot of let's do that again, let's do that again, let's do that again. And I feel like with the individuals that you have here who are interested in going into space, you have a nice and easy entry point into beginning to test out the form factor and how would this work if you're actually going to fly before you provide this to an individual with an upcoming flight. Because oftentimes when you fly, you don't have the luxury of the timeline that I had. Many people, they may have a month to 3 months if they're lucky, depending on what provider they're flying with and what they're assigned to. So if you've already done the work, if you've already laid the ground and the foundation through analog and other approximations of tech demonstrations, then you have a running start. So before we begin the questions, I want you to kind of think about these things. I want you to think about becoming a ready-to-fly science hub by creating experiments that can be flown in microgravity, that can be tailored to commercial astronauts. I also want you to think about engaging the analog base as a way to dry run some of these experiments because there's nothing like doing it, right? That's when you really find out whether it works or not. We've all been in a technical demonstration where something hasn't worked and been like, goodness, I'm glad we did that. The other thing I might invite you to think about is providing some level of funding to commercial space missions. I raised the funds for my flight. The amount of money that a partner had to give me in order to help me move across the finish line was far less than if one person had to do it, so to speak, right? It was really a network of individuals who came together and decided that they were going to help me fly. This is a much lower cost of entry for most space agencies and for most people around the world. So think about what nonprofits or what organizations you might be able to get involved with that could potentially help offload some of the costs, right? And reduce the barrier to entry. And lastly, I think that big ideas sometimes come from small or previously unthought of places. My father hails from the Bahamas, which you may know is an archipelago. We have 500 islands, which is not as much as you guys have here. 16 of those islands are inhabited, and we face some of the same challenges when it comes to hurricanes, inclement weather, communications, and the like. And one of the proudest moments of my life was coming off the airplane in the Bahamas and seeing a billboard that has me in my spacesuit on it. And it's the country congratulating me for being the first Bahamian to go to space. And that moment is more than just seeing my face on a sign. It's broadcasting to a nation and broadcasting to a world that space looks like us too. And the days that I've been to the Bahamas after that, I have seen so many young women and even some of the young men too. Shout out to you guys. Get out there and take selfies in front of the billboard. And the feedback that I get for our country is seeing you on a billboard was the first time that we saw a woman be elevated in society simply because she was smart. Where we saw science on the same level as celebrity, and where you did something that I could replicate or I could emulate simply by studying or applying myself. I don't have to run fast. I don't need to know how to dribble a ball. All I need to do is pursue what for many is the first dream that they ever have, the dream of going to space. And so now I get to talk to you about your dream of space, which is really my favorite part of the presentation. I get to stop talking at you and I can start talking with you, but there are a number of things that I feel that PhilSA can contribute to the wider community as you look to not only build your own space program, but you become actively involved with space programs, whether it's equipping commercial astronauts or potentially bringing some of the Starlink capabilities here to the Philippines. Was that was that a wild plug? It was a wild plug, right? You know, I traveled to the Bahamas with my Starlink terminal. So I had it in my backpack. They're like, "You're a nerd." I'm like, "No, I just like connectivity." But there are a lot of areas now in this landscape, which is rapidly evolving, for you to inject your brilliance and also for you to put your innovation on a global spotlight. Thank you so much, and I'm really excited to take your questions.
Right. Thank you very much, Miss Aisha. Uh, we would also like to acknowledge the presence of our Deputy Director General for Space Science and Technology, Dr. J. Gutierrez. Hi, ma'am. Good morning po. So, it made us realize a lot of things on her talk, right? So, what captivated me more about the talk is it is very difficult to be what you cannot see. So, definitely we have to work hard for our young generation to see the light of the aerospace engineering programs here in the Philippines. Thank you, Ms. Bowe, for that captivating and truly inspiring lecture. Your insights on how emerging space nations can leverage commercial platforms are invaluable. We will now open the floor for questions and answer. For our in-person attendees, please raise your hand if you have questions and wait for the microphone to approach you or to be passed on you. For joining us in via live stream, please type your questions into our chat box. Any questions from our audience?
Hi, Miss Aisha. Thank you for your talk. It's really been inspiring. Um, One of my questions is, we know that astronauts go through very rigorous filtering, training, and stuff like that. For commercial space flight, what type of um, what the process was it?
Yeah, so I will speak about my process. Because I came out of NASA and commercial spaceflight, I actually read the human spaceflight regulations. It's like 14 part CFR or something. Because that's the type of aerospace nerd that I am. And I trained for 2 years. So I actually trained at the NASTAR facility, which is a centrifuge that's human rated in North America. They've trained over 500 astronauts. I went through the hypoxia training. I did everything from skydiving. I flew an L-39. You get the picture. I did a lot in order to prepare myself for the day and to make sure that I had the presence of mind in order to conduct the experiment. Given that commercial spaceflight is commercial spaceflight, it ultimately will come up to the United States and the regulators to determine whether or not there's mandatory training in the future. However, I do highly encourage anybody who is going to fly to have those experiences. They're really key in being prepared for the actual day.
Thank you very much.
Great question.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
Hello, good morning. So, I was curious how many minutes have you stayed above the Karman line or the on space? Then, and maybe it's my second question is just if we have ongoing projects or projects in mind that are related to what you've discussed. What are the process of? Are we going to Fulbright or how can we communicate with you?
So I'm going to restate those questions to make sure that I understand. So the first question was, how many minutes were we in microgravity? And then the second question was if you're interested in space, how to get engaged, which projects?
If
Like
you have,
what mechanism, like Fulbright
yeah,
or
if you have potential collaborations, how what's the process in engaging to with
Ooh,
you?
you know what? I love that second question because that second question is a question I have for you. So I'm answering a question
give
with
it
a question.
I give it back to
Um,
my
so the
superiors.
first question is approximately 5 minutes in microgravity. And when I started to explore why the timeline was the timeline, what you begin to realize is the harder you go up, the harder you fall. And as we came back, we hit 6 Gs, which if you are not trained traditionally, that's a lot, right? You're talking 6 times your body weight standing on your neck as you're trying to breathe on the way down. And so for me, when we were going through that, I was like, okay, I've experienced this before because when you're at the NASA facility, you are seeing several simulations where you're experiencing this. But if you have not experienced that before, it is a moment in your life that you will not forget. So I think that Blue Origin has found the right trade-off between experience and safety. They could go higher. The engines do go higher, but are you putting the crew at risk if you do? They found the right way to do that, and that is why they've been able to successfully execute so many human-rated missions. And fun fact about that, because I didn't include this in the talk, but earlier I mentioned going out to the communities and talking about space and science and advocating for the pipeline. People ask me all the time, well, were you scared? A little bit. I fear. I think that's natural. It's human. I felt like if I wasn't a tiny bit scared, I would have been irresponsible. But for the most part on the day, I was extremely calm and I was very confident because I had mentored a girl since she was 13 years old who then interned at NASA and helped build the very same rocket engine that I flew on. So when I talk about the work that you guys do in space and science and the power of the billboard and the power of putting even Filipino engineers on the ground when you go to integrate, because we had students from the institutions that I work with there taking pictures, telling their colleagues, look at this, I flew this. It's more powerful than you can imagine. And in the next 10 years, you have no idea who the people you inspire will become. For the second question, I want to turn that over to you and to the esteemed leadership that you have here, because in some ways, it is the Wild West. And you could figure out who was flying and you could reach out to them. And they might be flattered if they get an email.
Thank you for that.
You can also go to the traditional programs. I mean, I encourage all routes. But for me, I mean, I just sent a crazy email like, hey, I have a seat to space. Do you want to partner with me? Probably the fastest response I've ever gotten to an email in my life. They were like, yes, what? I mean, because when we were flying nano satellites, it's like $50,000, $60,000 a kilogram. It was hard to get. It had to wait a couple of years. And like I said, a lot of people, if they were not at NASA or if they weren't at Cal, like they had to be in positions where they were funded and they had access. But now that paradigm is shifting, and you guys have demonstrated past performance. You can say, we just did this. Let us help you do that. And that is why I wanted to have this conversation to encourage you to think about expanding on a success you've already had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm excited for this question. Oh my gosh, it's coming from you. I love it.
Thank you. I have tons of questions in my mind now. The
Please.
challenge is how to organize and ask them. But first of all, thank you for such an inspiring talk. I'm glad I made it on time. I was worried not being able to catch you. But thank you for sharing your story. I think that's really what touches us most. It's a very authentic experience of yours. And my question is related to that. Actually,
Mhm.
the first one is, so you mentioned about the main challenge or the roadblock in your case is preparing this payload or this experiment, finding how to build it, and it's sort of a package deal for you to
Yeah.
fly, right? Now, it took some time from 2022 until 2025. So, was there any point in time through these years where you thought you would probably not be able to fly?
Yeah.
And what's your plan B in case I won't fly? What will I do now?
My plan B is plan A. I mean, I think there's some things in life that you cannot give up on. And there's a quote that I like, and it says, whether you believe that you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. And I was determined. And my family thought that I had lost my marbles. They're like, so you're going to space, right? Oh, right, right, right. Didn't you say you're going to space a year ago? Didn't you say you're going to space 2 years ago? And I'm like, sometimes things take time, right? Good things take time. And I worked, but there were also certain things that were indications that I was headed in the right direction. And one of the things that I'm honored to this day to speak about is Nancy Conrad, who's the wife of P. Conrad, who's the third man to walk on the moon. She was someone who I met the first week when I was working at NASA. She called me, and she's been a mentor to me ever since that phone call. I mean, I talked to her at least once a week. And she said, Aisha, when you fly, because you're going to fly, I want for you to take the personal American flag that Pete took when he went to the moon, and I'm going to call over to the Museum of Flight in Seattle, and I'm going to have him send it to you. And so when I flew, I had the personal American flag of P. Conrad. And that wasn't a conversation that happened overnight. It was a conversation that had happened after I signed, after I raised the money, when I was in that period of time wondering, was I going to fly? Was this going to be a success? And it became a beacon in the dark. And I started to look at timelines because there are some NASA astronauts, they too will wait years to fly. But you can't give up on the dream. I knew I had a seat, and I was determined to live out all the time between when I signed and when I flew. And when it happened, it was bigger than I ever could have imagined. I mean, we're one of the most watched space events since the moon landing. Who watched it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I feel like whether you wanted to watch it or not, you were watching it. And what was powerful about that is a lot of middle school teachers connected with me and they said, we hadn't really shown launches in schools since Space Shuttle. And now we're broadcasting this, and the students love it, and they're inspired, and they're excited. And so to you, I say, seeing my grandfather on national TV after the fact, because I definitely did have my cell phone that day, right? No Bluetooth communications in the capsule. Seeing him hug Oprah was the moment when my family was like, oh, this is real. And I'm just so happy that I stuck it out. But I think for many of us who are in aerospace or in science, we're fairly accustomed to those long periods of time where the crazy idea that you have goes from concept to implementation. And I encourage everyone to stick it out.
My other questions later, maybe others to ask.
Someone needs to tweet that. My plan B was plan A. Yeah.
Hi, Aisha. Thank you for the talk. Very inspiring. While you were talking about your experience uh, getting to this flight, my impression was, at least to me, is the hardest thing about it raising the funds? or did that come like, oh, that wasn't really the hard part of it? Because of course the actual flight itself would be hard. You'd need to train for it, but I'm just trying to grasp, how did you raise the funds for to get the seat?
Well, by the time that this challenge had approached me, I was already running an engineering company for 12 years. And in the US, my company has twice been recognized by Inc. as one of the fastest growing in America. We've received awards for small business, contracting excellence. And then I spun out another company called Lingo, where I had raised 2.3 million in venture capital backing in order to make self-paced STEM coding kits. So I had a little bit of experience. Now, the challenge was people still find the ROI on space to be abstract. That was the hard part. How do I promise you that whatever it is that I'm doing is going to be great? I promise people are going to see it, keeping in mind that I'm under NDAs. I really can't talk about the mission. I just have to get them to trust me that this is going to be awesome and they should be involved. And for that, I really leaned into my credibility as someone who's been in the NASA community and went back to the connections. The way that we were able to execute this research partnership was through a NASA colleague named Jennifer Lopez, who runs an organization called Odyssey Space, who you could also call, work with her. She's great. Shout out to J-Lo, the other J-Lo. But it really was me going to folks who were in space, who may have had access to individuals with high net worth, who may have had access to companies that had the desire to conduct research and saying, you know me, you know what I'm about, this is going to be great. And when it actually happened, it was sort of like this, wait, what? This is larger than anything than we thought it would be. And beyond the headlines, beyond public debate, there's something very powerful about putting aerospace and science on the same level as sports and culture. And if there could be a way to do that again on a continued basis globally, I really think we would see a difference in how people not only engage with our industry, but the relative attractiveness of it. And so I hope that that continues, right? I hope that there are billboards of the two individuals who I showed on the previous slide who want to go to space. I hope that there are PMs what PhilSA does and how they make the Philippines more secure, or how they increase disaster response times, or sorry, decrease disaster response times, whichever works for you better, right? But I really think there's also got to be this PR element to it, so that when you go to private individuals or corporations and you say, I'm going to space, they're like, oh, I want to back that because I understand the business behind it. Good question. I mean, I think that ROI piece is very abstract. Well, it can be for some people. But for BioServe, that was a great return on investment, right? Because they got their hardware flight qualified. And so maybe that's like a great angle to pursue, which is like finding companies that want to flight qualify hardware.
Right. Thank you very much. We have some question coming from our FB live stream. Regarding on geospatial data quality, do you categorize data quality dimension in sub quality elements?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sorry.
You're asking me about geospatial data quality?
Yes. Do you categorize data quality dimensions and its sub quality elements?
Into sub quality elements. Were they watching the talk?
That's what I thought initially.
No, I mean, I love the question. I did not talk about geospatial data, although that is an area that there are individuals in my company that work on. But I'm going to say we're going to take the next question.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, Miss Angie.
I always love the wildcard question.
Okay, hello. So I would like to ask you three things. First of all, what skills beyond engineering help you most in your career?
What skills beyond engineering? I would say courage. That to me is something that I've had to build over time because pretty much everything that I've wanted to do has not been popular, and definitely not with my mom. When I decided to leave my government job and found a company, she was not a fan. When I decided to found my second business, she became a fan. And now she's employee of the month every month. She's basically the mascot of the second business. Like, love her. She's a great worker. But I started to realize that oftentimes when you have vision, you can't tell people your dreams, you have to show them. And so you have to have the courage to stand 10 toes down on who you are and what you believe.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, two more to go.
Yeah, please. I'm
For
all yours.
for the second one, what's one thing you wish you knew earlier about your career or any in your field?
I wish that I fully understood that you are truly running your own race and to not measure yourself by anyone else's yardstick. When I went to announce the launch, there were people in my class who were, in my opinion, far more gifted, far more talented, far more resourced than me, but their assignment was making sure that I flew. They weren't sitting in that seat. And so for many years of my life, I used to think that being raised and not having the best of everything, being barely able to afford to go to school, having to take more classes, not necessarily having new clothes and new things. I mean, there were a lot of things that I perceived that I didn't have, but they were mostly material. And when I put those things aside and I look at what I learned how to work. I learned how to have faith. And those things have benefited me greatly over the course of the career. And I ended up in many instances at not only the same place, or sometimes in a better place than the people who I perceived had everything. So I think it's really important to not look at others' accomplishments and feel that in any way they dim yours, and to not feel stress or anxiety if you feel like you are not as far as long as you should be, because you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Thank you. Okay.
These questions are fire. It's great.
Okay. For the last question, the Philippines still doesn't have a first astronaut. Many students here dream of one day having that kind of reality. So, what advice could you tell to students here in the country who wants to be in the same field as you, who wants to get towards that kind of goal?
Well, I will tell them that it is going to happen and it will happen in their lifetime because of the individuals that are in this room. You guys are going to make it happen. And I look forward to seeing the billboard of that person on the internet. See, now you're going to make it happen. We just breathed it into being. The Bahamas didn't have one too. And 2025 was their year. So maybe 2026 is your year.
Okay, so I have a question regarding commercial partnerships. So I'm sure commercial partnerships in the USA didn't happen overnight. It was a lot of conversations and pitching. So I'm wondering, how do we do this locally? How do we pitch that space research is worth investing to our local conglomerates?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the attitudes and the appetites over the past few years have changed, really because the space industry has changed, right? So I would invite you to go to the individuals who are manifested to fly, because oftentimes that is the shortest distance, right? I mean, you're going point to point. Go to the people that have seats and ask them if they want to have a conversation, and then pitch them on your research. You might be surprised. when you talk about space here, I would really invite you to look at having more of like a venture capital style model with how information is presented and making it exciting, making it fun, making it engaging, but also making it relevant. When I was early in my career as an engineer, I was actually pretty boring. I thought I was great, but I was boring. I had a lot of stuff on the slides. Like you guys noticed, I'd have a lot of stuff on these slides, pictures. You had to actually listen to me and not get caught up reading all these slides. And so I do think that when you're thinking about going out and pitching people, I would take a step back and look at how do you tell a compelling story? How do you tell a story that makes someone feel a way that when you leave, they're compelled into action? And while the science is important, I feel like a lot of things come down to telling the story. And that's really what I did in order to raise the funds. I told a story about someone who was from a non-traditional path, who wanted to fly, and who was going to do the work to demonstrate independent space and world-class research. And I told the story so well that they believed in it, and it became true. Ooh, do we have anyone else? Yes, CubeSat guy.
I think I'll take the questions first if you don't mind.
Yes, hi.
So, as a fresh graduate of also aerospace engineering here in the Philippines, it's a relatively new program here in the Philippines if we're counting, considering that PhilSA is actually relatively new and emerging nation. I'm really curious about how your background in aerospace engineering was in the United States. We could definitely the insights of someone who was an undergraduate there. I really want to know if particularly for in the Philippines, or at least in my university, we had backgrounds in including aeronautics compared to astronautics. I wanted to know if you think, in terms of capacity building for the youth here that really want to focus on space science, would you really recommend for programs like those to really focus on space science?
I think it depends, right? And this is really going to come down to the institution to better understand where the industry is going and also the student body. For me, my undergrad was traditional aeronautical engineering predominantly. We were so excited when we had the option to pick between an aeronautical capstone or a space capstone. And I held my hands up for space, right? But you had to time your senior year right so you could take that class because it was only offered once a year. When I went into my master's program, I was determined that I was going to do a full space master's that was more applied. But at the time, the university didn't have a thesis-based option for that. So I had to make the choice to go into something that was applied. But that applied, I mean, we built satellites, we built link budgets, we did the whole payload thing, we flew weather balloons, we lost weather balloons. Like, I mean, I loved it. And I highly, highly would recommend it because for the type of learner I was, I needed to work with my hands and I needed to build real things. I was not so much like the computational fluid dynamics kid, which they were pushing hard, hard. I understand that, but I needed to build real things. So I really think it's up to the academic institution to kind of look at, okay, like where's industry going? For ours, Michigan appropriately identified that we were going to start to build smaller spacecraft and that we were going to have commercial launch providers. And I don't know if they have someone over there that does like a decadal or is like really into like aerospace trends, but they leaned forward and they took a gamble. And majority of my class are now industry leaders in these newer space initiatives. And so I think it's a balance. Some people they like the traditional, they'll be great PhDs, they'll be great lecturers, and they'll be, great Yodas at the companies they work in. And then you have people like me who will ultimately go out and build the thing and build other things. And the question is, how do we educate all kinds of folks?
That's amazing insights. Thank you.
Hey, I think we've got CubeSat guy.
Hi, Miss Aisha. CubeChat guy here. Um, well, one of the opportunities you mentioned for PhilSA to perhaps focus on was what you termed ready to fly science. So
Mhm.
um, things like experiment kits that
Yes.
some maybe commercial astronauts could use in the future. So you mentioned in your presentation, one of the suggestions you said was make it you have to consider the form factor.
Yeah.
So because you don't have all the space in the world in where you sat. But aside from size, is there any other or what are the critical considerations that we should think about when should FISA venture into making these kids? Like aside from size, what else should we think about?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to think about is when individuals are flying in commercial space, they have a limited amount of time. So everybody kind of has like a zero G plan. Some of the best experiments are the ones that are somewhat passive in the sense that you don't have to engage with them in order to make them work, right? So if you can fly something that's on an ankle or that's on a wrist, and the individual flyer does not have to press a button or plunge anything, that's actually top tier. Because all you have to do is find real estate on the body in order to monitor it to make sure that it's successful. I know we're on the internet, but I will tell you that doing a crunch in space was more challenging than I thought. And the reason I bring this up was because I originally had the opportunity to fly that plunger scenario on my ankle. That face, that's right. It was not going to happen. Now, there are some of my male colleagues who I believe was able to get that to work. I believe Rob Furl did that. And Rob flew a similar device and he conducted science successfully. But had I been trying to kind of crunch around up there, it was not going to work. And so we were actually able to put the payload in kind of like this armrest. And then I was able to leverage my body in order to actually plunge, which was great, right? But it wasn't even a design consideration I thought of until I was up there and was like, oh, thank goodness. This is not on my ankle. That's not great. So I think passive experiments are a win, right? The bio button I flew, I didn't have to do anything with that. I stuck it on a couple days before. I took it off afterwards, and the entire time it was capturing data. That is great. I think outside of that, form factor, but there's not that much space either on the person or in the vehicle. And those are things that you can actually get from Blue Origin. They take emails. I'm sure if leadership sends them an email, I know the guy. I can hook you up. And kind of just say, hey, we're interested in this. Maybe could you provide some ideas about what the available space is? And you could kind of design to that as a constraint. That would be good. But the part that I was also getting at with the zero G plan is because there's a certain amount of time and space, most individuals will try to find an experiment that if you have to engage with it, the amount of engagement is somewhat limited. And so I think if you find something that requires for you to fiddle with it in some way, you want to try to keep that to maybe 30 seconds or below.
Okay, thank you. I actually had thought of a follow-up question, but you answered it. Like I was gonna ask, like you mentioned the kit should be turnkey. Well, I was gonna ask how turnkey are we talking about? Like very minimal or absolutely no interaction? Would that be nice? And yeah, I think it would indeed be nice if we alleviated some effort from the
Yeah, I
astronauts.
feel like no effort is the way to go. Or even if it's self-contained and all it has to do is float. Because in some of those instances, you might even be able to get clearance for it to float around and maybe not go back in the pouch. I don't know. We have to ask the spaceflight provider, right? I mean, as long as it's something that's not going to cause harm to who's ever in the cabin. But the experiment that I had was really pushing it. It barely fits. And so in the video that you didn't see, but I'm telling you about, I was really trying to shove it back in because it barely fit. And if I had to do it over again, I mean, I don't make the BioSurf tubes. I'd have told them to make a tube that was maybe an inch or so shorter because it would have been able to go in and go out more smoothly. But now you can benefit from my expertise and you can reach out to Blue Origin or whomever the launch provider is and ask them what the available space is and then design down to it. And bonus points if no one has to do anything.
Okay. Uh,
Well, I know I was kind of gonna wink, wink, nod, nod, but the anxiety that I spoke about during the presentation was real because you only have so much time and you're up there and you're like, okay, I did it. And then the thought gets in your mind of, what if I didn't do it right? What if my science doesn't yield any results? And you can't wait until you figure out if it did. So, I mean, if you can engineer it so that it is foolproof, even better. It's good for you and it's good for the space traveler. Do we have anything else? If oh yes.
Right. Well, more of a comment, really. But I am truly enjoying the conversation here.
Okay.
But I just like to mention that we are extremely privileged to have you. Thank you, Fulbright and have the U.S. Embassy for introducing you to us. You are the second out of the five women, full female crew who went to that mission, who interacted with us. Amanda, we met her few months before the flight. So I feel like PhilSA is very privileged to have met two out of five. Maybe we'll get their other three soon.
That's above my pay grade. Well, look over here.
So we're going to complete the full crew. But actually, what I want to say is I truly appreciate you listing down the different areas that the Philippines can look into. And I'm happy to say we are doing maybe two or three of that already. You mentioned Christine Atienza. In fact, I was with her this morning in the conference. I
I'm trying to
spoke
get them to
there.
take me there tomorrow.
Yes.
Put in a request. I did.
Right. And I learned that she would be spending some time here in PhilSA more frequently than I initially thought. Like every once a week, she'll be here because they're working with the team, ISMDT, on analog missions and some payload that they can bring or some science experiment that they can bring in the next analog mission.
See?
So we are very excited. We're working on that already. And yeah, thank you for sharing it with us. And I'm happy to also share our progress on this work.
Thank you. And it is truly an honor to be here. And I hope that you guys know that the world saw your research. I saw it float in real life, but I hope that you continue innovative partnerships that not only expand the PhilSA reach, but that allow you to move forward the science.
Thank you very much. So we appreciate all your activeness and questions to our discussion, but we have to cut it. Okay. But maybe there's an opportunity after this program to ask personally Miss Aisha a question. To conclude our program, we would like to present a small token and a certificate to Miss Aisha Bowe for her time and her incredible contribution for today's event. May we invite Doc Mark and Doc Gay for the awarding of the certificate and small token. Let me read the citation. This certificate of appreciation is presented to Aisha Bowe in recognition for sharing her expertise and knowledge as a resource speaker during the lecture on innovations in aerospace and satellite technology on 11th of August 2025. Her participation played a crucial role in the success of the Philippine Space Week celebration. Presented this 11th day of August 2025 at the Philippine Space Agency office, Cyber One Building 11, Eastwood Avenue, Bagong Bayan, Quezon City. Signed, Dennis F. Villorente, Deputy Director General for Space Operations, Infrastructure, and Industry, Philippine Space Agency. All right. Thank you very much from our guest. Thank you, online participants and our active in-person participants and our PhilSA crewmates for making this event a great success. Thank you very much.